Rest Stop with Brad Restituto.
Comes up the pocket, fires the right side, caught by Diggs. Stay up! Oh my God! Oh my God! Touchdown! Are you kidding me? It's the Minneapolis Miracle!
I got 3 words for you. You like that? Yeah!
All aboard! Welcome to the Rest Stop, live on a Tuesday, September 29th. We come to you live at 9 o'clock Pacific time every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for joining us to jump on board. We may have to change that open as the Vikings and Kirk Cousins get off to an 0-3 start after losing to the Titans this weekend. We got a really good show for you. My man Ed Graney from the Review Journal will join us. He is the Renaissance man of Las Vegas media, as he has a morning show, a podcast, and he's a writer for the Review Journal covering the Raiders. So we'll get some NFL thoughts and some Raiders talk from Ed. We got a few new segments that are going to be fun, so make sure you stay tuned. We're going to kick it off with Time for Church with the Believer, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Spencer the Wiz, my main man, my producer of the Rest Stop, he's got himself a segment coming off. It's Just a Little Wiz with Spencer the Wiz, and we got just tons of talk for you today with COVID, the presidential debate. We've got Raiders without masks. We've got our NFL picks that we'll review. We've got some basketball news as the final start, WNBA also. So make sure you stay tuned with us here at the Rest Stop. Again, we come to you live every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 to 10 o'clock Pacific time. And make sure you download the Twitch app and go to www.chrislandryfootball. And that's going to be under twitch.tv/chrislandryfootball. If you miss us here live, you can go to any of my social media pages, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Brad the Believer, and then also make sure you search any of your podcasting platforms. You make sure that you want to search Landry Football Conference Call, and underneath that umbrella, you'll see the Rest Stop. Spence, without further ado, let's get into our new section. It's time for church, my man.
The one thing that I want for you to know is that I love you.
Okay, Spence, you're probably wondering what this is about. Well, look, the month of September has been quite interesting for the Believer. I've really had quite the positive spirit coming into this month. My girlfriend, she's in full effect. She's coming back with the love of Jesus into the household. We are watching sermons on a weekly basis. We're reading The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. I read my Jesus devotionals every morning, and I'm fired up about it, Spence, because I'm just feeling good. You know why I'm feeling good, Spence? Because in the past, the Believers made some mistakes, right? Tons of mistakes. But I can always reflect on my behavior and modify that, right? And it's a good thing. But during this COVID-19 pandemic, it's not my fault, okay? Everything that's going on around me is out of my hands, okay? Whether it's jobs that I've been released from, whether it's opportunities I've been passed over, it's something that I really don't have a lot of control over. So I've had to kind of give up my pride, my ego, and my expectations and kind of surrender it to my God, to my Lord and Savior Jesus. Okay, so I've taken time to meditate and to surrender my pride and my ego. Because in the past, being in this industry, I've seen people be in spots that I've wanted to be in or thought I deserved. But at this point in time, I've kind of had to put all that behind me. And I've had to take an attitude of gratitude, Spence. And the first thing the Believer is grateful for, I'm looking right at him, Spencer the Wiz. Because the Rest Stop would not be what it is without Spencer the Wiz. And he's been somebody that I would not have met if things would have happened differently. So my first level of thanks goes to you, Spencer the Wiz, and my attitude of gratitude, because I would not have my own platform and Spencer the Wiz and the Rest Stop if it weren't for you and your help on this show. So I want to say thank you to you, Spencer the Wiz. And also, everything that's going on, like I said, out of my control. But having this platform and having free reign to do what I do, I have to thank Chris Landry Football. I got to thank the Tominator and my mom. The Tominator helped me get my computer going this weekend. You know, it was slow, Spence. Well, now it's working like a whiz this weekend. So I'm just feeling good about this month. about this week. I still don't really have a job due to COVID, but you know what? I've got some irons in the fire. And what I'm doing during this Believer Church month, really it's not a month, it's a lifestyle, is I'm not standing by waiting for stuff to fall out of the sky. I'm slowly trying to make things happen, continue to build relationships, and the right thing will present itself as long as I stay diligent and I stay consistent. So I'm very grateful for the people in my life, Spence, and I'm grateful for the rest stop, and I'm grateful for you. So that's where we're at now. And there's some things that still need to be ironed out in the Believer's character. But one thing during Pastor Michael Todd, what he taught me today was things that are in the dark, they need their time before they're shown to the light. It's like pictures in a camera. They go to the dark room when they're developed, but they've got to be developed before you have the final print. So the Believer in the rest stop is in developmental mode until he's ready to get everything right, and then he will break free into the wilderness. So I'm very pumped up about that. But enough of my rambling, Spence, as church session is now over. But we go to a new bishop, the bishop of Las Vegas sports media, the one, the only, Ed Graney, joining us. Ed, sorry, I know I made you had a couple more sips with that rant session there, but thanks for sticking through it.
Brother, if I'm in charge of anything, we're all in trouble. So you stay as the bishop, and I'll just stay as the guy who writes and talks about nonsense. That's kind of my lane.
All right. Well, I'm going to take you out of your lane, but just for a quick second, I want to ask you. I know you're not much into politics, but if you were to observe the presidential debate tonight, how would that play if it was a radio show with those two jabronis talking over each other for 45 minutes?
You know the famous Mountain West Conference basketball official Dave Hall. We like to give a hard time to, right? Well, he didn't officiate the next one because Chris Wallace was lost. I mean, and I don't know how much was his fault or not, because those are two dudes that, you're trying to get in the middle of, and it's hard. But what a disaster on all levels. I mean, I think in one TV in the house where my wife was, I think 10 minutes in, I heard something else on the TV, because it just got to be, when so many people talk over each other, you just don't know what you're listening to after a while. So I didn't. I'm not one to speak out politically, like you said, but I did watch it. I think it's important to watch. I have a son and daughter who are very politically minded, one in grad school, one a sophomore in college. So, they're very politically minded right now, which is good. I like that about them, love that about them. But for me, I just kind of wanted to sit back and watch. And after a while, brother, I was depressed there weren't many sports on tonight, because that got kind of crazy to watch.
Yeah, speaking of sports, Ed, let's keep it in the Vegas Valley. The Las Vegas Aces, one of our new professional teams, they find their way into the WNBA Finals this week. Aside from that, my question to you is UNLV sports. I'm thinking with all the professional sports here, UNLV sports is kind of getting lost in the shuffle. Are they really going to be an afterthought in this town, given all the success of professional sports, if they don't get something together in the positive direction as a program?
Yeah, I mean, football especially. There's always going to be basketball fans because of Tark. I mean, so you're always going to have kind of that base fan of basketball. But football, with Marcus Arroyo as a first-year coach, they've got to win. Now, this is a different year, obviously, because they're only going to play probably 8 conference games because of the COVID, and everyone's it's just going to kind of be weird. But in the years to come, yeah, I think with the Raiders, I mean, I just know from my paper standpoint, if you see what we do on a weekly basis, it is heavy Raiders, and I agree with that, because it's the NFL. When you have an NFL team in your town, that's the story. Then you have the Knights. Now you're talking about the Aces. So, yeah, UNLV football has to win. That's just the way it is. I mean, the basketball team hasn't been in the NCAA tournament in a long time. It's still basketball. I think you can see where TJ's building it. But I think it's more important, Brad, like you said, football has to win. And I'm not saying like 10-1 in a given year. I'm not even saying 8-4. I'm saying get to 6-5 and go to the New Mexico Bowl. And I think people will be happy with that as basketball season starts. You just can't keep going 5-7, 4-8. You just can't keep doing that now that the Raiders are in town. It will not be good for you in the end in terms of what you said, perception or even like interest.
Ed Graney joining us. You can find his work, the Review Journal. He covers the Raiders, covers sports. He also has a local morning show, The Press Box with Ed Graney. The Morning Drive on local ESPN radio, also does a podcast. Ed, before we get some Raiders stuff on the field, of course, some of the story going around was the function last night where there wasn't a lot of masks going on. We had news come out in the NFL with the Titans and the Vikings having to postpone activity. The optics don't look good here. Is there a possible after effect that we're going to have to see some delays in organized team activity because of this?
Well, I read that the NFL thinks they're getting the Titans off this week against the Steelers, the Vikings against the Texans. We'll see. I mean, I assume the Vikings are waiting for tests back. Once the Titans pop 3 or 4, then obviously the Vikings said, okay, you got to test seriously now and today and to see. But yeah, I mean, as far as the Raiders look, it's very bad optics. It was really bad that the Titans came out today after this. But Darren Waller held his gala last night for his foundation to help young adults without alcohol and drug addiction. He's an addict himself, 3 years sober. Incredible foundation for kids. And the really sad part was, ultimately, the story became several Raiders, including Derek Carr, not wearing masks, intermingling with the public. Derek Carr actually taking a picture with and fist bumping a man who paid a lot of money for his jersey, but with no masks. And at the end of the day, given what the NFL protocols are, and let's be honest, the Clark County and the Nevada protocols are, it was just a horrible optic and bad lack of judgment. So they'll probably get fined by the NFL. I know their owner is not happy. I talked to him. This is not the headlines they want to see. As he told me, put the masks on. That's what we tell everyone. So it'll blow over in time. But no, Brad, it was a bad look for them. And it really took away. And that's the sad part. Like Derek Carr and those guys showed up to help Darren Waller. Like they were there for their teammate. They're there supporting him. And Mark Davis loves that. But he said, put on a mask. I mean, it was really easy. So it's a bad look for them, and it's too bad that it took away from a night that should have been about the kids.
Yeah, and I really want to touch on this because it hits personal to me too. Not just the standpoint of Darren Waller's foundation, but also what Dak Prescott, Hunter Henry talked about, and something that I think gets overlooked: the mental health aspect of professional athletes in sports. It's really unfortunate that the great foundation and function, what they were all there for, gets overlooked by this because it's really something I'd like to be discussed further. What Darren Waller was about and what really some of these players want to talk about more on a grand stage.
Absolutely. I mean, we have 2 players now, Robin Leonard with the Knights, who obviously have spoken open on mental health issues. Now Darren Waller with his addiction. And that's great. The more you talk about it, it's great. I mean, those guys being the faces and pro athletes in this town, and, they hold some cachet there as pro athletes on the 2 major teams. So, yeah, you want these kind of galas. You want these guys speaking about it. You want them talking to the media about it to get their message out. And you don't want it to be interrupted by what we had to do all today, which was chase a story and guys who didn't put masks on. Now, as the Raiders owner Mark Davis told me, I understand this is a story. We made it a story by not wearing the masks. Wear the masks. If they wear the mask, it's not a story. So, and, I think people who are mad at that kind of reporting, I would only say, okay, let me give you this scenario. If you're a Raiders fan, nobody wants this to happen, but one of the players last night gets it for some reason. And he tests today, or he tests tomorrow, symptoms not yet. He tests tomorrow after he's around everyone, and then half the team goes down. Now, you still okay with us not reporting it? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a story. They should have had masks on. Their owner wasn't happy, and they need to abide by health safety protocols, starting with the NFL. The NFL has their protocols. The state has their protocols, and they pretty much violated everyone. Now, Sisolak today came out with the new number, but that new number was not in play last night when there were far more than 50 people in that room. So I think it's a lesson learned. My guess is, talking to the owner today, I believe you will always see the Raiders in the foreseeable future with their masks on. I'll just leave it at that.
There we go. Ed, some more stuff maybe not reported in the Review Journal, but definitely on Twitter. I call it Tipgate. There was no names mentioned, but one of our local radio guys, Dave Koken, was in the middle of this. It's definitely got some chatter and got some Raiders fans fired up. Yeah. Ed, you've been in this town for quite some time. Hospitality is the lifeblood of this town. From what you can gather, just give us a little thoughts on that entire dynamic and some of the conversation.
So Dave Koken didn't name the player, but if you follow it, a certain Raider answered back to Dave Koken. So he kind of outed himself, really. I'm not going to say who it is. It's not my business, but just go to Dave Koken's Twitter and you'll see who answered back to him. $600 bill. Reportedly a $10 tip, right? That's what everyone heard. Look, a lot of players, when they come into the league, this has been talked about. This is why there's money managers at their first meeting. How do you handle money? They've never had this kind of money. They've never been in a situation probably where they can go buy $600 worth of food. And it's just one of those, I think maybe a situation where I don't know the player well enough to where I could sit here and really rip him for it because I don't know his background. I don't know if he ever had the means to buy that much food. I don't know anything about him other than who he is on the team and what he does for the team. So I will say this, my guess is, like with the masks, he'll tip more next time just for the sake of not going on Twitter and not having to deal with it. But, we have fun with this stuff. I mean, Tiger, Jordan, there have been some major athletes in this town who have really gotten a hard time for not tipping. I don't want to put this kid in it who's a rookie yet, because I just don't know the situation with him and if he really understood the whole situation. Now, Tiger and Jordan, they understand the situation. They know a little better, but I'll hold judgment on this guy because I just think it's his first year in the league. He's young, from a different part of the country, never had this kind of money. And I think sometimes you get into a situation where, you know what? I mean, I would have been the same way if I came out of college and all of a sudden I had millions of dollars and I've never tipped anybody, and $600. Like, well, I'll give you this $10. It's not good. I don't know. So it made for some good tweets though between unsaid player and Dave Koken. It's great. Koken go back and forth with anyone on Twitter.
I agree with you there. And Ed, I'm going to bring you on again because I got a good tipping story involving me, but I'll save that for another day. Let's get to some on the field stuff with the Raiders. A definitely surprising 2-0 start. They travel east to take on the Patriots this past Sunday. You were there. Tough not having Henry Ruggs in the lineup. Belichick, he's great at taking away what you do best. Darren Waller, definitely in the first half, was almost ineffective. Belichick, he keeps finding a way. Talk about that matchup and what it meant for the Raiders in defeat.
Yeah, I mean, the short story is they did everything you can't do on the road, especially against Belichick, and win the game. So they were never going to win, turn it over 3 times. They did. They were never going to win breaking down defensively and giving up 250 yards. They did. So they just did things that you're just not going to win that game. Missing a field goal when they could have tied it, then Newton takes them the whole way to go up 10. I mean, they didn't play well. But say in the long run, when I looked at the schedule before the year, Brad, Carolina, Breeze, at the Patriots, Buffalo, who's good, at Mahomes, by Brady. So that's like 6 games. I think I said if they could get out of it 2-4, the back end is really easy. Now, remember, there's an extra wild card game this year. That's on the back end, Denver twice, they're horrible. The Jets are a mess. Just don't play Atlanta in the first half. Show for the second half, you'll win the game because they might be the worst second half team in the history of football. Cleveland, you never know where in that time of the season where it's at. So what my point is, the Chargers, everyone's hurt now. My point is there's a lot of Miami as well. There's a lot of potential wins on the back end to where if I think they're 2-4, it might sound a little crazy, but with the extra wild card, and if they can get healthy, they've got a lot of injuries, they could be in it for that extra wild card. I just don't think people should at 2-4 say, oh, it's over. The schedule really softens after Brady comes here. So, they didn't play well. I don't think anyone thought they'd beat the Saints. No one thought to beat the Patriots. They're still +1 on the season, right? Because they're favored to beat Carolina. They did. Not favored to beat the Saints. They did. And they weren't supposed to beat New England. So they're +1. And I'll tell you what, and you're much better at this than I am. The fact that the Bills are laying 2.5, 3, kind of, you can tell me if I'm wrong, kind of makes me shade to the Raiders for a few reasons. One, it's always like, what'd you see last? And they were horrible. But 2, I would guess looking at that number, wouldn't the books want you betting Buffalo after what you saw from the Raiders? Like, if all that, I only have to give up 2 or 3 against these guys. I mean, wouldn't that's what the books would want or no?
Yeah, yeah, that's what the books want. We have a guy on the show, diehard Raiders fan, Spence, jump in here. He thinks the Raiders are the worst team in the league aside from the Jets and the Giants, and he's a Raiders fan.
Spence is like me with the Dodgers, best team in baseball. I think they're going to lose to the Milwaukee Brewers in 2 games.
Spence, you said you love the Bills -3. Okay, so talk Graney off the ledge here. Tell me.
Yeah, no, they're handing out free money at the sportsbook. I really can't believe it. I think it's going to be a blowout. Derek Carr got exposed last week, not being able to pass 10 yards. Henry Ruggs will definitely help. I'm not going to lie and say that, but this Bills defense is much as vulnerable they looked at the end. Obviously, at the game, I think the Raiders' offense is nowhere close to the Rams, so they'll never be able to score 20 points in a surge. The Raiders won't be able to score 20 points in this game, and the Raiders defensively, their secondary is just not very good. They have no run game. This big free agent acquisition of Corey Littleton, which I'll admit I was excited about as well, has been one of the worst linebackers in the league, according to Pro Football Focus, which
20,
I don't know if
29.
Yeah,
well, keep this in mind, guys. Okay, the Rams and their second-string running back, Henderson, ran up and down the Bills' defense last week. So I don't know if the Raiders expect Incognito to come back, but they should be able to run the ball against Buffalo. So
Incognito's still out because he's on the IR, so he's out a few more weeks. Spence makes a great point about Littleton, and I think what we forgot, someone on the morning show reminded me about this. If you go to the Rams last year, Littleton was probably their 6th best defensive player, right? But when he came here, it was like, oh, he's going to be – it's hard to go from 6 to 1 on a bad defense, right? So you're going to go be number 1 on a defense that was terrible. So you can be a little better, but you're not going to make everyone better. So Spencer's really right in that. I think people like, well, what's wrong with Corey Littleton? I said the same thing when I saw when I was told his Pro Football rating, his focus rating. But let's be honest. Now, had he been the number one guy in the Rams coming, then you'd be like, all right, well, what's wrong with you? But he was like the sixth best player. So you're like, maybe it's now making sense that we're not hearing his name every snap.
It's the same with the safety. Everyone from we're somehow obsessed with defensive players from the Rams that end up leaving. I can't think of his name now, but he's been equally, if not worse. So it's just really not working out. And I don't blame them. I was a fan of Corey Littleton as well coming into the offseason, but it's more than that, right? There's no pass rush outside of Max Crosby. Damon Arnett is a great tackler. He's literally one of the best tackling corners in the league, but it doesn't matter when you're getting blown past. And Abrams, as much as exciting as it was to see him get his first interception, he's so out of place like 90% of the time on run defense, especially. It's like it hurts to watch with your eyes. Yeah,
he's and here's the thing I think about Jonathan. I actually talked to Rodney Harrison, the former Charger, today about Jonathan Abram. He was hard on him, but he said, look, he's really a first year guy because you have to learn. It can't be a home run hit every play. Sometimes you just have to break a guy down. He goes, his problem is twofold. He goes, like you said, Spencer, he takes bad angles and he overruns everything. And if you do that against McCaffrey or even Sony Michel's we saw, you have no chance. Those guys are too good. Never mind McCaffrey, Sony Michel, my goodness, ripped him. But the other thing is, and Rodney said this, he goes, look, he goes, you also have to look at the levels 1 and 2, say, what the hell are you guys doing? Because when your safety's involved in that many plays, there's something wrong ahead of him, right? So if you're getting past the first, second, or first two levels, and Jonathan Abrams taking bad angles, you have no chance. But what Harrison has said, like, look ahead of you too, because those guys aren't doing their job if this guy's coming up making all those tackles.
Yeah, and I think we can take it one step further. I think we can all finally admit it. No one wants to say it, but I will say it on behalf of everybody who follows the Raiders. Cleveland Farrell is a bad football player. He won't be on this team in 2 years.
Wow, strong words from the Wiz.
I cannot argue with the Wiz, nor will I ever, because I never thought I'd say I'd argue with the Wiz. So I'm not arguing with the Wiz.
Right.
All right, let's talk about the Raiders' opponent this weekend. And somebody who I've been on the bandwagon, but some of your colleagues aren't big fans of, quarterback Josh Allen.
Yeah. I know the colleague you're talking about. Hello, Adam Hill. I can't take a side because I write the column, but if you tell me Josh Allen throws 6 TDs this week, I'll have a little smile on my face because Adam Hill, who still doesn't believe he's any good, by the way.
Right.
Like I'm watching the numbers on the Rams game, and granted they came back, but Josh Allen, like, look at his numbers. He still does not believe he's any good. So I'm not going to be bummed if he comes in and just tears it up because Adam sits 2 feet from me, or now 6 feet socially distanced in the press box, and I will be laughing at him the whole game if this guy just goes up and down the field.
Yeah, and this is the same quarterback evaluator who thinks Russell Wilson, who's got more touchdown passes and incompletions, is overrated. Okay, so
wow.
Your guy, Adam Hill. He's not a Russell Wilson fan.
Wow.
Ask him.
Russell Wilson, who has never gotten a first place MVP vote, might be the biggest all-time joke in the fact world that he's never gotten a first place MVP vote. I heard that, and I know MVP you have to go year to year, so sometimes you have a great year, but then some guys, are Steve Nash, and they just have this incredible year, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Steve Nash is the MVP. It's kind of like that goes like that in a given year. But the fact, let's be honest, Russell Wilson's going to get some votes this year. He's unbelievable.
Spence, you've got to research this for me. I'm willing to go out on a limb, Ed, and say Russell Wilson statistically is a top 3 third down quarterback as far as efficiency in the history of the game. I've never seen anybody better on third down. Not only with his legs, but I mean, he threw that touchdown pass on third down and long this week against the Cowboys. The guy is unbelievable on third down. He extends plays, extends drives, and he's done this with really nobody of note offensively. I mean, you're talking about a makeshift offensive line, the tight end position that's been a merry-go-round in Seattle, and now you just get DJ Metcalf in his second year along with Tyler Lockett, who's about as tall as an ant. Russell Wilson's incredible.
He's an incredible player.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And, not only Russell Wilson, Ed, let's real quick talk about the quarterback position as a whole in the NFL. Through 3 weeks, Aaron Rodgers, who people were putting out to the pasture, has decided to wake up and say, wait a minute, I'm not done yet. Him, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, man. I mean, the quarterback position is in good of a place in the National Football League as it's been in a long time.
You know who I also think is doing really well, but he's on a bad team, is Joe Burrow.
Oh, God.
I think that guy, I got to give him credit. He surprised me because, everyone said, okay, 1 year LSU, wasn't the system. You had all these pros around you. I've watched 2 of their games. I tape them when I'm not here. I'm like, you know what? that guy's really, he's going to be good if they could get people around him. He doesn't seem phased. He doesn't seem overwhelmed. He doesn't seem like he thinks he can't make plays. I think Joe Burrow so as good as Joe Burrow has been in my mind and watching him. I saw this guy live and then I watched him the other night, and he's had an incredible career. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think 20 years has caught up with Drew Brees because there's just nothing left in the arm, and you feel kind of bad because he has to be at the end. But I mean, what an incredible career! He's going to go out with pretty much every record there is. So he's a first ballot guy. But boy, I watched that game the other night of the Packers. They're both older. I mean, Aaron's older too, but you're right about Aaron. He's kind of been reinvigorated here, and while he's going up, kind of Drew is going down. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about Joe Burrow, and I don't care about the Bengals, but I just like players. And I don't know who's going to get the first pick. I kind of hope it's not the Jets because I'd really feel bad for this kid if he had to go there. But I really want to see how Trevor Lawrence next year translates because obviously he's the first pick. I just don't want him to go to the Jets because the Jets are just the Jets. But these young quarterbacks coming in, I want to see Tua, right? Justin Herbert, they've been pretty good. I mean, for a guy thrown in there. So I'm with you. I like all the young quarterbacks. And I think, like you said, the quarterback position is really good for the future. We haven't even seen Lawrence yet.
That's right. And a few more before we wrap it up with you. I want to continue with Joe Burrow for a second. I'm not patting myself on the back too much, but I'm curious since you've watched some film on him. I'm really the only one that's compared Joe Burrow to Russell Wilson. I think what he does in the pocket with some of the footwork and his ability to extend plays on third down and the way he can throw the deep ball with touch, I think he's got a lot of Russell Wilson in him. Have you thought about any comparisons or some of the stuff that Burrow does that you really like?
That's the first one I've heard of him, and I think it's a great comparison, body-wise. Now, Joe Burrow is going to be – he will develop his body like Russell's. Obviously, Russell's more of a man at this point, body-wise and physically. But Joe Burrow is going to do that when he's in an NFL weight room the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. Can move with his feet, can throw with accuracy with his feet. I think it's a great comparison. In 4 or 5 years, like I said, he'll mature body-wise. Physically, he'll get thicker. He's still really kind of small. He's not like – he's not Kyler Murray small, but I mean, he's got to get some thickness to him at that height to withstand being in that league. But yeah, Brad, that's a great comparison. Put it this way: if he's a third of Russell Wilson, he's going to have a pretty good career. Yeah,
and look, I challenge anybody that hasn't watched it. Just watch what Joe Burrow does with his feet in the pocket and how he can extend plays.
Yeah.
So he's good. He's going to be real good on a bad team.
Yeah.
So, Ed. Let's continue real quick as we're wrapping it up with you, Ed Graney. You can check out his stuff in the Review Journal as he covers the Raiders. Also, the morning show, Press Box in the Morning on local ESPN 1100 radio. Also does a podcast. Ed, with the Raiders against the Bills this week, you talked about that extended playoff spot. In your time covering the team thus far, who has really stood out to you on a personal level that's kind of opened up to you about maybe the direction that this team sees long-term? Look, John Gruden has a 10-year contract. Mike Mayock is firmly in there. They haven't been flawless in the draft process, but they've been very convicted about the things that they've done. Talk about that real quick.
They've actually drafted better late, which is kind of interesting. Well, I'll tell you the two best interviews in that entire locker room. It might surprise you, might not, are Hunter Renfrow and Richie Incognito. Richie Incognito's amazing interview. People knew him coming in and all his issues, but for us, for what you and I do on a daily basis, man, can't get better than him. But yeah, I mean, I think long-term wise, they're happy to be in Vegas, but you have an owner who wants to win and gave a guy a 10-year contract. Look, no matter what anyone thinks, the question this year will be Derek Carr. I think they'll look at their record at the end of the year. Did they make the playoffs? If not, what do they do? There's a lot of quarterbacks open in that draft next year. I mean, I don't, unless they make a huge trade, they're not getting Trevor Lawrence, but there's a lot of good quarterbacks in that draft. So if for whatever reason they do what they did last year and just go on a tumble, then I think a change is coming because you have no dead money on the cap with Derek Carr. But if he does well and makes the playoffs, I think they'll just continue on with him. A big issue right now is Trent Brown. How hurt is this guy really? I mean, Richie Incognito gets hurt and they put him on IR right away. They haven't put Trent Brown on IR. The guy's been out one day of practice. And I think there's some people in the building saying, got to go now, man. You're the right tackle, the highest paid offensive lineman in history. We need you to go. He hasn't gone. Nick Kwiatkowski's hurt. That hurts them on defense. Henry Ruggs is hurt. Brian Edwards is now hurt. So they're banged up, but you know what? It's the NFL. They've got to play. Wiz is right, man. They got to play defense. They haven't been good defense in a long time. They're still not really good at defense. So they better find a way to get to a quarterback and defend people, because on some weeks they could get to 25 and 30. We've seen 30 a couple times a year, but not every week. They're going to start playing teams like Buffalo with a lot better defenses, and then all of a sudden it's going to be 16-20, and I don't know how many games they can win that way, Brad, if they keep playing defense like that.
Ed, last thought before we let you go. It says "Go Dodgers" next to your name here. Tell us about this Major League Baseball shortened season. Everybody's in the playoffs, it seems like. Is there an asterisk next to the season? And if not, how does it play out?
Well, there won't be an asterisk if the Dodgers win, my friend. then everything's cool. No, I asked Pete DeBoer that about from the night before they started the hub. Is there an asterisk? And he said, no, we're all the same. We're all starting the same level. Someone's going to win something. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it. I will tell you one thing, and I'll bet you lunch at Red Rock, but we'll make people that we gave free gifts to pay. If the Dodgers lose in the first round, which could happen on a 2 out of 3, like 2 out of 3, if people say, oh, you're crazy, not in 2 out of 3. You got to get hot for 2 games. 3 out of 5, 4 out of 7, the Dodgers probably beat most people. But if they lose in the first round, I will bet you anything that next year it's 3 out of 5, because the TV revenue they will lose if that team goes out first. As good as that team is with the stars that they have, it'll never be 2 out of 3 again. So, I'm a lunatic about them. The only team I'm a lunatic about. I have favorite teams, but nothing like that team growing up, nothing like that team my whole life. So obviously I am like the Wiz with the Raiders. I think the Brewers will probably sweep them in 2 games, and you will not see me for months. I will be under a desk hiding, just completely depressed.
Follow Ed Graney at Ed Graney on Twitter, of course, in the Review Journal and morning show here locally in Las Vegas. Ed, I love you, brother. Thanks for a little time. We'll have you back on, man.
Be well. See you, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Take care.
That was Ed Graney, Spencer the Wiz. What are your thoughts there? He agrees with you a lot there on the Raiders, man. Are you still standing by Buffalo as your play of the week this week?
Yeah, I really am. I don't think it's going to be very close. And let me just preface this by saying that I don't enjoy any moment of seeing the Raiders get blown out every week. It's not something that I look forward to. It's not something I wish upon. I make this bet because of my sports knowledge, not because I want to see the Raiders lose. I'm not sadistic. I hope they win the Super Bowl every year. That's what I hope for. But I just know in reality that this team is not poised to be within 3 points against a Bills team as talented as they are.
Spence, let's keep it in the NFL, and let's do some recapping of this past Sunday. Before we get to our picks and some of those, let's start off with the Atlanta Falcons. 2 weeks in a row, they blow a fourth quarter, 2 touchdown plus lead. Dan Quinn, the hot seat is underrated. I mean, this guy's got to have 1 foot out the door. And Nick Foles comes in relief, down 16, and leads them back to victory at home in Atlanta. It's just disgusting. Falcons fans 0-3, should be 2-1. What were you to make about them blowing another 14-plus point lead in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, no shame, no pride. It sounds extreme to say out loud, but I mean, you got to draw the line somewhere. I mean, it all started with this blown Super Bowl, and I think it's a little inflated. Yes, it's the biggest Super Bowl comeback of all time, but they had like a quarter and a half, and it was only a 3-score game. I just think that, just real quick to talk about that, I just think that in your mind, when you see like a basketball game with that much of a difference, you think it's impossible to come back. But being that it was a 3-score game, it's very impressive, but still. But it carried on, right? We've seen it just happen every year and year again, where it's these impossible comebacks that should only happen like once every 5 years, happen twice a year for the Falcons. So it's really just one of those bizarre things that you see in sports.
Spence, in that same game, Nick Foles comes in relief for the Bears. 3 fourth-quarter touchdown passes. Looks like he's going to have the reins the rest of the year, and that might be a great thing for the Bears and Bears fans. And we're talking about a 3-0 football team. It's not a team that got off to an 0-2 start under Trubisky, but definitely had some juice in that fourth quarter. The Bears, they lose Tariq Cohen for the year with an ACL, but they've got some weapons on that team. Ed talked about the expanded playoff in both conferences. The Bears could be in really good position to make some noise with Nick Foles under center. Prime
candidate, and the Bears are better now with Nick Foles. The ability to pass the ball downfield. He may not be the most accurate. He may not make the best decisions, but if we're talking just on the roster they have now, I really think it was indicative of how much they invested in him that he won the week 1 job. Like they kind of felt like they had to. I bet you Nick Foles was outperforming him in practice. I just think there's no way that it's not that case. But they're just trying to hide their embarrassment of missing up on Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes. And on top of that, trading up to get Trubisky, who wasn't even that impressive in college anyways. but they're going to have to roll with the punches now, and they got lucky to get Nick Foles for such a low investment, who hopefully will not get hurt within the next couple of weeks, because we know he's had issues with that in his career.
Spence, one of the more disturbing losses over the weekend. In the chat, Benny Superfly's team, the Los Angeles Chargers, as a 7-point home favorite, get dominated and beat outright by the Carolina Panthers without Christian McCaffrey. What's going on with the Chargers? It's the same story year after year. They're so freaking inconsistent. They can never live up to their potential. Supposedly a good defense. Herbert looked good the week before against arguably the best team in football, the Chiefs, and they go out and lay an egg, and they get dominated wire to wire by the Carolina Panthers in the first win for rookie head coach Matt Rule.
Yeah, as a Raiders fan, obviously I care very little for the Chargers, and it doesn't mean anything to me if they keep being terrible. But I will tell you that was the most disappointing game of the week. Obviously, we picked them in their segment. It's not like I bet them with my personal money, but still, it looked like a week where you have this, you should have beaten the Chiefs. You have this great defensive performance. So then you're going into the Panthers, right, with no Christian McCaffrey. And yes, Teddy Bridgewater is still quite a very good quarterback, without a doubt. He is able to pass the ball very successfully. And then you just kind of have a stinker. You allow too many points. And Justin Herbert, who really had the chance to perform against one of the worst defenses in football, and he's just average. So I don't know what to make of the Chargers. I really don't.
Spence, COVID-19 came out finally in the NFL, has some noise. Started off with the Tennessee Titans. They reported some positive tests. That bleeds over to the Vikings, and now it looks like organized team activities due to COVID will halt practice for the Titans and the Vikings this week. Speaking of the Vikings, they fall to 0-3. They finally get some offense going as Justin Jefferson had a $175 through the air. I talked about that on the show. They need to get him involved. They did, but the defense still can't stop anybody. How is this COVID-19 going to bleed over now to some of these teams? I mean, we talked about the Raiders organizing without masks. That's just something you can't do with a lot of people and people you don't know. This is how outbreaks happen. So, Spence, just some carelessness by the Raiders, and how many more people are not following protocol when the eyes aren't on them?
Yeah, and we've talked about this too in the college sense, where I said I don't trust college kids to fall. But projecting forward, we talk about NFL guys who talk about their egos. And yes, this was a banquet for like a good cause. So, it's not as serious, but I have to imagine that other guys in the NFL are also just not following the rules because they aren't tracked. They're not in a bubble. And these guys are not used to following the rules anyways. They make so much money where you're in a different reality. Let's be honest. You live in the same world technically, but people treat you differently. You have more money, more resources than anybody around you. And I do not expect this to be the last outbreak of COVID-19 for the NFL season.
Spence, before we pull up the picks, we've got an email at the Rest Stop now, reststoppodcast@gmail.com. If you want to jump in and take on me and the Wiz on Thursdays, our picks against the spread, email the show, email any comments. Corey Fulton, who gave me his picks through text message, had a pretty good week, but it doesn't count in the Rest Stop standings because you didn't come under the lights and make the picks. So, Spence, pull up the picks. The Believer was underwhelming in his record this week, but keep in mind I got robbed 3 times as my pick of the week, the Houston Texans, were up the entire game, wire to wire in the fourth quarter, and then they decided to give up a touchdown late in the Steelers win and cover. Another game, the Falcons, who we had, were up double digits in the fourth quarter. We talked about their collapse, so that was another win for the Believer, took it away. Also, I had the Cowboys, +5. They're up 31-30. Late in the fourth quarter, have a 3rd and long, and instead of just allowing a field goal to stay within that number, Russell Wilson goes deep for a touchdown. So the Believer had 3 wins right there, snagged away from him last second. So, Spence, let's start at the beginning, and we'll start Bengals-Eagles. The Believer was on the right side there, had +4.5 of the Bengals. We talked about Joe Burrow. The Eagles 0-3. They look like crap. Talk about that game real quick, Spence.
Yeah, and I was really excited for a moment watching that game because I was like, "Oh, they go into overtime. All I need is a touchdown, and I'll be good to go, and I'll be lucky." And then it just comes to a punt session, and you're like, "What do you mean they have all this momentum going into overtime, and they can't even get into the red zone?" I'll accept the loss if they can just get a field goal, but they couldn't even do that. So once again, for 2 weeks in this young season, I've taken the Eagles and I've just been spat on in the face. And I have another tough decision coming up because they're a touchdown deficit against the injury-riddled 49ers. But we'll talk about that on Thursday.
Titans, Vikings. Titans seem to be the right side. That number was weird. The Vikings finally got Justin Jefferson involved, but the defense was just dreadful. Steven Gostkowski, who cost us money, cost us win percentages in week 1 because he couldn't kick an extra point, decides to wake up, go 5 for 5 field goals in this game. Titans get the win by 1. So that's just disgusting. Gostkowski's disgusting. Kickers are disgusting. As my picks went downhill, like I said earlier in the show, I made a 5-team parlay last minute, had Heat money line, had Chiefs money line, had Packers plus 3.5 in the over, and I had over. I got a good number, 54 in the Chiefs-Ravens game. And I get a push, Spence. Why? Because that moron kicker, Harrison Butker, who hits 3 50-yarders in a row last week, not only misses an extra point, but has a 42-yarder, which is a chip shot, for an elite NFL kicker. He misses that. So I can't even get the over on that because some moron kicker decides he can't be consistent. It's disgusting. And that's the reason I'm only collecting $400 and I still can't pay my rent instead of the $800 that I was deserved by getting over 54, and Butker blew it for me.
Yeah, this is a game at the margins, just like it's the equivalent of free throws in basketball. If you want to make a comparison between the two, I hate it when it comes down to free throws for the over or under. It's just the worst feeling in the world.
Spence, the next game, the official worst team in the entire NFL, the New York Football Giants against a hapless San Francisco 49ers team who's missing almost half of their roster. They get their ass kicked 36-9, something like that. The Giants score 9 points at home. Oh, man, and all the money went on the Giants. I'm going against the Giants every single week. They're so bad to get beat by Nick Mullins, and your best 2 defensive players are out, running backs, linemen, everybody's out, and the Niners still go up and down the field. The Giants are disgusting.
Yeah, the only team that may be worse than them are their neighbors in the Jets. It's just... wow, it's impressive. It's almost impressive how bad they are. It's like how bad can 2 teams in one city be at the same time? It's like you have to actually coordinate with each other and see how bad you can get your team. Daniel Jones will probably not be the quarterback for the Giants in a couple years. Same with gonna hit the reset button.
Spence, we talked about Steelers, Texans. I was going to text you at 17.
Easy.
I was ready to text you at 17-3 and talk about how the Texans' money line was great. Then all of a sudden, they stopped playing in the second half, and they allowed that idiot Roethlisberger, who's a stiff these day and age, and that sorry Steelers offense to come back, not only win, but cover late in the fourth.
Never doubted it for 1 second. That
Get out of
defense
here. Okay, let's go
to play at the second half.
Let's go on to the next game. Rams Bills, Spence. That was a hell of a game.
I predicted it.
The Rams came all the way back, and then a fluke pass interference call in the Bills' favor got them the go-ahead touchdown. Really late start for the Rams as they didn't wake up till the second half, but we know what that offense is capable of. Let's give the Bills and Josh Allen credit, though. Josh Allen is a good player. I don't care what anybody says. His stats over the last 14 games are as good as anybody's. The Bills are going to be right in the conversation for one of the top 2 seeds. The Rams traveled East Coast, couldn't get the job done, so we lost out on that one. We were both right on the Browns. I don't take the Browns very often, but this is a prime spot for them to get an easy win. But they made it close, Spence. In the fourth quarter, they were actually down 4 points to the Redskins before scoring a few unanswered. They get the win. And then, of course, the next one after that, we were both on the Patriots as they win easily against the Raiders. Talk about that one real quick.
Yeah, it was just so choreographed. We knew Darren Waller was going to be taken out of the game, which was appropriate. And yeah, we talked about earlier, didn't have Ruggs, but this team everyone's going to watch the game tape on this. The blueprint is out. So run game, it really doesn't matter. They don't have a passing defense. They don't have a run defense. The offense isn't nearly as explosive as it was made out to be in the first couple weeks. And I think we will see that trend continue unless the Raiders play a really bad team, which they don't really have a soft schedule.
I agree with you, Spence. Let's go to the next row because we already touched on Bears, Falcons, and that one. Panthers, Chargers, we hit on that briefly. Just really disgusting performance by the Chargers. If they expect to compete for a playoff spot, you can't lose to the Panthers at home without McCaffrey. You got a young team that's injury-riddled, traveling West Coast, and the Chargers just lay an egg like that. Totally unacceptable, Spence.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then they could come out next week and have a big win. That's the kind of performances you're getting out of the Chargers right now.
I was completely on the wrong side of this next one. I was on the Jets. It was more a play against the Colts, but the Jets are definitely at a tie for the worst team with the Giants. But Corey, yes, I bet the Jets because the Colts are the team I'm going to be fading, and I'll be fading them every week until it plays out like I know it will. Phillip Rivers can't move, okay? He cannot move in the pocket. So if you put pressure on him, you're going to make him throw interceptions, and you can hit him. Well, that Colts offensive line has played outstanding. So I don't know what's going on with the defensive that are facing the Colts thus far, but they're not hitting Rivers. And the Colts are finding ways to manufacture points. They're not that good. Okay, so hopefully we find a team that they play here in the next couple of weeks that's going to give them a run for their money because they're going to be overvalued. They're starting running backs out. They've got a receiver that's out. The Colts are not as good as that scoreboard shows last week. The Jets are just that bad, and Adam Gase will be gone sooner than later. Next game, Seahawks, Cowboys. Spence, you were on the right side. That's another one I got robbed at as the Cowboys were up 31-30 late. They should have held the Seahawks to a game-winning field goal. Instead, Russ Wilson throws a touchdown pass on 3rd and long late in the fourth quarter. Seahawks win and get the cover, Spence.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, before you go that, let's say that was not a fluke win because the real fluke in that game came on that long touchdown pass that should have gone in. So let's not go there. But my guy from Ole Miss, who I just couldn't believe slid that far, and the fact that the Raiders didn't take him, I think, is close to a crime. But he's a superstar now. The Seahawks are superstars. The defense still doesn't look great, but again, the Cowboys do have one of the best offenses in the league. So I'll be curious longevity-wise, projecting into the playoffs, how they are able to perform against some of the better teams.
Spence, what I thought was maybe the easiest game of the week as a favorite, the Denver Broncos, they're just without Drew Lock. Drew Lock isn't the greatest thing, but he had some momentum going. The Broncos are going to turn to Brett Rippon out of Boise State on a short week against the Jets this Thursday. That's going to be a stinker, but Tom Brady and the Bucs get a nice, easy win on the road, and they get the cover there also, Spence.
Yeah, this was my game of the week. It was just so easy. To me, this looks exactly like the Raiders game to me, the way I look at it and how easy it is. It could be wrong, but the fact that it was less than a touchdown, it just, I don't know, actually at like 7 even, but still, I would have taken it at that point too.
Spence, let's go to the next row of games as we finish up our picks of the week. Lions, Cardinals, I talked about it in detail, the week 1 matchup that ended in a tie last year as the Lions blew a big lead. I knew these teams personnel-wise matched up well. I was on the Lions. Everybody else in the world was on the Cardinals, so that's the game I looked the best on. Yeah,
it was a great call. But the thing is with the Lions, they're a good team. Excuse me, they're a great team. Like, not great, but they're a playoff team, in my opinion, like roster-wise, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I'm a big fan of DeAndre Swift. Yes, he did drop that very important game-winning pass against the Bears in week 1, and they'd be staring at a 2-1 versus 1-2 now. But TJ Hawkinson is definitely one of the best tight ends in the league, and you have really good playmakers on the outside. So I don't know what to make of the Lions. I mean, that was a big win. So maybe it was enough momentum for them and able to kind of shake things off and look forward because I think they could be a wild card team.
Yeah, and I think games against any team besides the Packers that they're 6-point dogs or more, it's worth a look on the Lions because they're going to be a competitive team as long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot. We were both on the Packers against the Saints. Drew Brees looks like his best days are a little bit behind him. Aaron Rodgers without Devontae Adams doesn't matter. He looked great. Nice win. And if you had him on the money line, an even better win.
Yeah, this was the most bizarre line. And I talked about this last episode. I have no idea how the Packers weren't favored in this. It's time to take Drew Brees behind the shed. Jameis Winston will probably be in by week 8 is my bold prediction.
Spence, the final game, and I got to give Benny Superfly credit. He was on the Chiefs from start to finish. It took me a while to come around as I thought the Ravens had the momentum. But gosh, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs looked exactly like they were at the end of last year, Super Bowl champs, and they really dominated start to finish. That game ended up as a 14-point win. It could have easily been 21 or more.
Yeah, I'd like to say and like give myself credit, like, oh, I knew it was going to be a blowout. No, I didn't think that. I saw plus points next to the Chief, and that was kind of my mentality into this game. Ended up working out very well in my favor.
Corey Fulton, he's upset because he's not getting enough props on his great picks this week. He knows the rest stop. He knows the rest stop email address. He can come back on and talk about it. One thing he is right about, though, the presidential debate tonight was like this Thursday night game that we're going to preview coming up in 2 days. The Denver Broncos, led by quarterback Brett Rippon, will take on Sam Darnold and the New York Jets. I believe the Broncos are a short favorite in that one, Spence. The over-under sitting at 40. I'm going to go to the well again. If Brett Rippon's getting the start, I'm going to say Darnold finally has a good game. I'm going to take the Jets' money line if they're the underdog in this one, Spence, on Thursday.
Wait, who do the Jets play?
The Broncos. Thursday night, this Thursday.
Oh, what an awful game.
Worst game. Worse than last week's Jaguars-Dolphins.
Yeah, I could even get behind that game a little bit because I like Gardner Minshew. I'm going to go
Jets Broncos, Spence. Jets Broncos.
I'm going to take the Broncos. I think the Broncos are solid enough defensively to cause enough turnovers to swing this game. But
I would tend to agree, but I just think Sam Darnold's going to have a decent game at some point, and I think that some point's Thursday.
He's running for his life. Like part of it is his fault. Well, there's two things. He has no weapons, and he has no offensive line. It's like everything's going against him. I would take him up on the cheap if I was the Raiders. So I'm going to give a call, and hopefully I can get something done. All
right, because the only way anyone's watching that game is if they have money on it. So make sure you email make sure you email us at the Rest Stop's new email, reststoppodcast@gmail.com. If you want to challenge the believer in the Wiz, we will pick every game against the spread on Thursday. Jump on the podcast, pick against us in order to be the champ. If not, too bad. So Spence, as we wrap up our sports talk, I want to get to it's just a little whiz here in the minute. But before we do, NBA Finals is set. The Miami Heat finished off the Boston Celtics. It'll be Heat Lakers NBA Finals Game 1 starting off soon, Spence. How do you think this series is going to play out? Will it be a good one, or are the Lakers going to roll?
I don't think they're going to roll, but I'm leaning so heavy towards the Lakers here. And the key pivotal player of this series will obviously be Bam Adebayo. You know, he has this defensive prowess. He had that game-winning block against the Celtics, but he's not going up against Daniel Tice this time. He's going up against Anthony Davis. So, you know, in theory, those two could be like cancel each other out. I just think Anthony Davis is a little more talented than being canceled out by Bam Adebayo. But if he's able to surprise us, this young guy, who I believe it has like 23 years old compared to Anthony Davis is 27, if I'm not mistaken. The other Outer and Andre Iguodala, because they'll be the full-time guys on LeBron James, and maybe in the last 2 minutes you'll see Jimmy Butler. I don't expect to see Jimmy Butler on LeBron James full-time because he's got to step up offensively for this team to have a chance, because we know the Lakers are going to be pretty good on the perimeter. They face guys like Jamal Murray and Damian Lillard and James Harden in the first 3 rounds, and while those teams aren't great defensively or as good as the Heat, we know this Lakers team hasn't maybe not had the hardest time going into it, but in these key positions, I think they've had decent matchups to prepare them for this finals. For a Heat roster that quite honestly doesn't have a superstar, Jimmy Butler might be. I'm still not able to call him that. You know, the guy still has 12-point games every once in a while. So, but we know what he's going to bring offensively and defensively. I'm leaning Lakers here.
Spence, I think Miami shooters, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero are going to have to go off. I think LeBron steps it up into another gear for the finals, more than we saw in the last series where he was awesome on defense. I think Rajon Rondo steps it up to another gear. And I think, in turn, Kuzma will play better. I think the Lakers will roll in this series. I think they win it in 5. And I think Game 1, they win by double digits. I don't know the line, but I think Rondo, LeBron have a really good game. The only thing that'll stop them from covering is if they're awful from the free throw line. I think Dwight Howard gets some run and plays well. I think the Lakers are going to come out like a house of fire in Game 1. So we'll see how that matches up. Finally, covering basketball, Spence, I don't know if you saw this story, but in the chat, Corey Fulton's brother from another mother, Delonte West, he's in the news. as a former NBA player who has a close tie to LeBron James of the Lakers, has been homeless and addicted to drugs for quite some time. Mark Cuban comes in as the savior and gets this guy reunited with his mom, from what I hear, paying for drug rehab for him. Did you read this story?
Yeah, no, I did hear about it. And the thing is, I feel like my first gut reaction was, why weren't they doing this earlier? Especially a guy like Mark Cuban, who has infinite wealth, basically. But the fact that they're still doing it is a good thing. So I won't be too harsh on anybody involved, especially now that they're finally getting the help, which is a good thing.
Yeah, Corey, I think LeBron gets the finals MVP. The way he closed out the Denver Nuggets, I think you'll see some of the same action in this series. I think LeBron closes it out. I think he plants his stake as still the greatest player in the game, even 15-plus years in. He's been great in these playoffs, and for him to cap it off with the title in year one with Anthony Davis, look, I've always said, and look, it may be what we saw recently, but I think LeBron James, for my money, he's the best player that ever has put a uniform on. Better than MJ, better than anybody. And look, that's why it's a fun debate. I think LeBron James changes the game on both ends of the floor. Nobody's made more finals appearances consecutively than him. Not MJ, not anybody. And you can argue and say that Scottie Pippen was the best second man ever. LeBron James, to do it at this high a level without any serious injury for this long is unheard of. And the guy, he had 1 year last year of no playoffs, came back this year with the break. How he played in that Denver series on both ends of the floor was inspiring. Aside from Anthony Davis, you don't really say that the Lakers have any superstars that are going to scare you. So for him to continue to elevate the play of his teammates is something special. So LeBron, for me, win or lose, he's the GOAT in my eyes. Look, I respect MJ. I respect Kobe. They're definitely on the Mount Rushmore, but for my money, LeBron gets the gold medal. But as we're finishing up here, Spence, hit the music. It's time for Just a Little Whiz. Spence?
This really pisses me off. Let's rock.
Yeah, so if I can go off a little bit here, it's like a little mini rant. That's what the segment will be about. I got into a little bit of an argument online, as most people do at some point in their lifetime, and we talked about comic book heroes and comic book movies and all that kind of stuff. And the subject came up of, does it matter what the race of the superhero is when they're portrayed in these movies? And obviously, I forget the guy's name, but he's an African-American man being offered the position, or rumored to be in the position, of Reed Richards, which is Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. And to me, I say, who cares? Because the fundamental character of Reed Richards is not a Caucasian man. It's the fact that he's really smart and that he has this stretching ability. So if they were to change the character, make Reed Richards like this head, guy of reconstructing a neighborhood of some sort, yeah, maybe I'd be like, okay, you're changing the fundamental ideology of this character. But the fact that if an African American man stretches or a white guy, it makes no difference. As long as I like the actor and I think he would be good in that role, I see no issues with it. And there's also the arguments people say, oh, what if they made Batman's suit orange? Well, now you're really starting to go off on a tangent here, because Batman's suit is dark because it helps him with stealth and stuff like that. That changes the fundamental ideology of that character. And the guy was also saying, why don't they just make different characters? Like, well, that takes a lot of investment. And especially nowadays, if you're going to try to make a new character, you got to put so much into it. And it's just not easy to do that anymore. So, you know what? If they want to change, like if Batman was like Asian or something, who cares? Because he's still Batman. But that's all I got to say on that, Brad. I don't know if you have an opinion on this subject, but it really messed with me and it kind of annoyed me.
I'm going to save my opinion for a later date, but that was Just a Little Whiz with Spencer the Wiz. And also follow Spencer's YouTube channel, Blue Milk Boys Gaming. Like, subscribe. Spence, anything else you want to plug? That on Instagram as well, Blue Milk Boys Gaming?
Yeah, be on the look in the future. I'm starting. I already have my own sports podcast, but it will be going on the radio at some point in October. I will say it at that. When it gets closer to the date, I will let you guys know. I'm going to try to do a lot of fantasy advice. I think I'm going to gear my show off of that. So if you guys ever have questions right before game day, I'll be coming on Friday night. So I will be.
Yeah, well, Corey Fulton needs some fantasy advice as his team is trying to hover above 500, I'm sure. But look, if you missed any part of the show, make sure you check out the church. The church is in session at the beginning of the rest stop today. Make sure you go back and listen to that and watch it on my YouTube channel, Brad the Believer. You can find all of our podcasts on the Facebook page, on the Twitter page, at Brad the Believer. Also, make sure you go to www.twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. Download the Twitch app and make sure you watch us live every Tuesday and Thursday. Also, search any of the podcast platforms: Google Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Search Landry Football's conference call and then search The Believer. I want to thank Spencer the Wiz, Corey, Benny Superfly. I want to thank Ed Graney from the Review Journal. I want to thank everyone that's listening. Please keep listening, subscribing, liking, as we'll be with you again live on Thursday. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll be back at it for Brad the Believer and Spencer the Wiz. It's a rest stop. Have a great night.